This video is designed to support Unit 3, which looks at politics in Germany between 1900 and 1914. The focus of this video is the character and personality of the Kaiser himself, Wilhelm. Wilhelm was born in 1859. He was the eldest child of Friedrich, who became Kaiser Friedrich III for just 99 days in 1888, and Victoria, who was the eldest daughter of Queen Victoria of Great Britain. He had a very difficult breech birth delivery, which resulted in the partial paralysis of his left arm and damage to the balance mechanism in his ear. And those things affected him throughout his entire life. And there has been great speculation about the possible psychological consequences of both his difficult birth and his childhood. He had a strained relationship with his parents, especially his mother, and he grew apart from both of them in his adolescent years. He was opposed to their liberal sympathies and preferred the company of both his grandfather and the Bismarcks, and found solace in the regimental life of the military garrison at Potsdam and Berlin. He was an intelligent man and at times could be absolutely charming. He had a broad range of interests and great pride in his country and his ancestry. However, his understanding of issues was usually superficial and distorted by his own prejudices. He was so sensitive to criticism and so taken up by his own self-importance that his moods and behaviour were liable to wild fluctuations. Wilhelm's behaviour can be seen as symptoms of insanity or megalomania or sadism. It's also been suggested that he was narcissistically disturbed, which is very difficult to say and means basically that he was in love with himself. It's also been suggested he was a repressed homosexual. One of his closest friends, Philip of Eulenburg, was an open homosexual, and there was a scandal about that in the early 1900s. Or it was also suggested that Wilhelm suffered from attention deficiency disorder. The consensus now strongly suggests that Wilhelm was, in the words of historian John Roll, if not clinically insane, at least deeply disturbed. Wilhelm once boasted that he'd never actually read the Constitution of the Second Reich, and that gives an interesting insight into the outlook of Germany's leader. He had no doubts about his own position. He was an autocrat, and his authority was based on the divine right of kings. His accountability was to God alone. He was also a Hohenzollern, and as such a warrior king who led and commanded his people militarily. In 1891 he gave a speech to some new army recruits, in which he said, "Recruits, you have sworn me allegiance. That, children of my God, means that you are now my soldiers. You've given yourselves over to me, body and soul. There is only one enemy for you, and that is my enemy. With the present socialist agitation, it may be that I shall order you to shoot down your own families, your brothers, yes, your parents, which may God forbid, but then too you just follow your orders without murmur." No doubt there about how important he sees his own role. His desire to establish personal rule was made possible by his monopolistic control over appointments to the imperial government. But his leadership amounted to little more than whimsical flights of fancy and blundering interventions. Such inadequacy was made worse by his rights of patronage and appointments. By this, he was able to surround himself at court and in government with men who were prepared to bolster his own inflated opinion of himself by sympathising with his views. Their political future depended on keeping the support of the Kaiser, so it made perfect sense for them to say yes to everything he wanted. The thesis of the Kaiser's personal rule as a system of government centred on the imperial court has been most forcibly argued by the historian John Roll. He built up a psychological portrait of the Kaiser to complement his analysis of Wilhelmine politics. He concluded that the essential traits of the Kaiser's persona do equate with those of a mentally unbalanced character. His usual mood could only ever be termed manic, and on occasions it turned to counterphobic rage. Rage, I think. This neurotic character, flattered and charmed by an inner circle of friends, advisors and military officers, successfully established a political primacy over other sources of power. At the centre of this system were two mutual friends, Philip, Prince of Eulenberg, and Bernhard von Bülow. Eulenberg and the Kaiser were undoubtedly very close, and whilst Bülow's relationship with Wilhelm was a close one, he was sycophantic and insincere. However, in considering Wilhelm's importance and significance, it's worth bearing in mind several points. The Kaiser's grasp of politics was very limited. Moreover, he was essentially lazy and pleasure-seeking. He was never able to settle down to the regular routine required of government administration. He much preferred to spend his time playing the social and ceremonial roles of a monarch. He liked to travel. He visited Britain, he visited America, he went to Russia, and he liked to take part in military manoeuvres. And so he was actually absent from Berlin for very long periods of time. The Kaiser might have appeared and behaved as an omnipotent autocrat, but it's important to distinguish between the projected images of the time and historical reality. Just very quickly run through the chancellors that Wilhelm appointed, because the focus for governing the country is inevitably going to fall upon the chancellor. None of them really, though, were great leaders or able to exercise any real authority and conviction. After Bismarck's resignation, he appointed General Leo von Caprivi, who was Chancellor from 1890 to 1894. He was followed by Prince Hohenlohe from 1894 to 1900, Bernhard von Bülow from 1900 to 1909, and finally Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg from 1910 to 1917. None of them really made a major impact. They had to balance the Reichstag and the Kaiser's changing moods. The historian Jeff Layton, in the book From Bismarck to Hitler, says, in summing up the chancellors, that, quote, Imperial Germany got the chancellors it deserved. They were the products of a constitution which made them accountable first and foremost to the sovereign. Under Wilhelm I, this had not mattered, since he had deferred to Bismarck, but his grandson was determined to participate in the affairs of state. Political survival for Germany's four chancellors was therefore essentially dependent upon showing loyalty to the Kaiser, and this was far from easy when Wilhelm II's personal involvement was often erratic and blundering. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful.